Imagine yourself sitting down to your Seder. You're completely exhausted. It feels like you've been working so hard for years just to make it to this night. But finally, your house is ready, your meal is ready, and you're seated at the head of the table. And you want to take a moment just to pause, just take in the scene, to soak up the atmosphere in the room, to smell the chicken soup. As you lit your candles, as Yom Tov came in, the words Shechianu, V'kiyamanu, V'higianu had never held such meaning. Who would ever have thought that would arrive at this night? As the magnitude of the occasion finally starts to sink in, you find yourself becoming overwhelmed with emotion. It's the first time that you've all sat together for a meal like this in your family home. It's beginning to dawn on you it'll be your last time too. You turn your gaze onto every face that's seated around your table, and you study them and absorb them one by one. To your right is your daughter, sitting with her husband and son. The two of you are incredibly close. She's so caring and intuitive. She always knows the right thing to do or to say. And you work together too. And she's so much her mother's daughter that you make a really amazing team. She feels your gaze on her and gives your hand a tight squeeze as she sees the tears starting to well up in your eyes. You give her a smile as you blink them back and turn your gaze to your left. Your older son and daughter-in-law sitting there with their 4 sons all lined up in a row. Your heart fills with pride as you think about what a kind-hearted, peace-loving son he is and how he's been your rock as he's grown into his role as the man of the house. And with that, you flick a glance at the seat opposite you at the other end of the table, but you quickly look away again as it still pains you to see it empty. You smile sadly as you think about how often you'll talk to your husband about this very night, about how you'd all be together again, and now he's not even here to see it. And finally, you turn your attention to your youngest son, your baby at the far end of the table. He sits slightly apart from the others. He's not quite at ease, but just the sight of him sitting in your home at your table with his wife and 2 little boys makes your heart just want to burst with sheer joy. You think back to his childhood, to all that time you missed out on spending with him, to the pitying looks from your neighbours after he was taken from you. Those looks that turned into loud whispers and furtive glances as the news broke of him committing murder and having to flee the country. Well, look at me now, you think to yourself. I always knew I'd get nachas from that boy. I could see it in his face from the moment he was born. And finally, the tears and the emotion that you've managed to hold in all evening burst out of you in a loud sob. Suddenly, the room goes quiet. All the chatter stops and everyone turns to look at you. Are you okay, Emma? What is it? Miriam asks. You compose your thoughts and you start to speak. I just can't believe that this moment's actually arrived. One of my earliest memories is of me as a little girl walking into the room where my father Levi was sitting and learning Torah with my Saba Yaakov. When Saba saw me, he called me over and put me on his lap. He said to me, Yocheved, I was just telling your Abba about Yetzias Mitzrayim, about what will happen when we leave here. I asked him, but Saba, how do you know what's going to happen? And do you know what he told me? He said, I know because my Saba Avraham set me on his knee when I was a little boy, and he told me all about the promises Hashem made him. And now I'm telling you, Yocheved, that one day you'll be a very old lady, you'll be a safta to loads of gorgeous grandchildren, and I want you to promise me you'll tell them what I'm telling you. You're going to see the most incredible miracles, things I could only dream of. And when it finally happens, even if it's a long time in coming, you'll remember that Hashem promised my Saba, who promised me, who's promising you, and you'll be able to tell your grandchildren that this was all part of the plan all along, and that Hashem loves you, and he'll turn you into the most incredible nation the world has ever seen, and he'll give you his amazing Torah for you to enjoy and to teach the world. And now I can't believe that I'm actually here, an old lady of 210, in the moment that he promised me would happen. And I believed him, but now I'm really seeing it. And Moshe, I can't believe that you're here too. There wasn't a moment that went by without me thinking of you and longing for you. And now you're sitting at my Yom Tov table with Zipporah, and I finally get to meet you, Gershom and Eliezer, and I'm already besotted with you. And you get to spend time with your cousins, with Chor and Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, Isama. It's just the best night of my life. I only wish someone would invent some kind of device where I could capture this moment in time, like a picture that I could look at again and again, so I'll always remember this amazing moment. At this point, Moshe clears his throat. Imma, if I may, I think I may have the solution. When Hashem told me about this night and all the laws of the Korban Pesach, he told me that we have to eat our lamb with matzah. What's matzah? I asked him. He explained that when we leave, we're going to be in such a hurry that our bread on our backs as we're walking won't have time to rise, and it'll become flat matzah instead. Now, hang on a minute, I asked him. We're only leaving the next day after eating the Korban Pesach in the morning. Perhaps the bread the next day won't have time to rise because we'll be in a hurry in the morning, but where are the bread the night before? Why can't we have bread? We'll have time all day the day before to make it. He said to me, Moshe, you don't get it. You have to eat the korban with matzah. And when you leave, you have to keep kneading your dough on the way, bursting all the bubbles of air so that it doesn't get a chance to rise to become chametz. It has to be matzah. That is the whole point of Pesach. In fact, you may have thought that I was going to call it Chag HaGeula or Chag Yetzias Mitzrayim. That would make a lot of sense. But I'm not. I'm going to call it Chag HaMatzos because this Yom Tov is all about matzah. So I said to him, okay, I get it, Hashem. Thanks for clearing that up. I was just about to ask you what we're going to call this Yom Tov, but I still don't understand what's so great about matzah. So now I'm going to explain to all of you sitting around the table with me why this is the festival of matzah. This is what Hashem told me. Now, take a second to look around you. I see the faces of Aaron and Elisheva who welcome me back in the warmest way possible. Aaron stood by my side throughout everything I've been through. I see Miriam and Kalev. Miriam, you're the reason I even exist. Without your Neville, I'd never have been born. And without you watching me as a baby, I'd never have survived. And you, my dear Imma, all the time I was in Paro's palace, I never forgot the love you poured into me for those first 3 years. I pictured your face singing me Shema every night, and that is what got me through all those years alone. And now, listen to what's going on outside around us. Listen. You can hear the screams of the Mitzrayim as the blood of their gods adorns every Jewish doorpost, and they mourn the death of their firstborns. That is the sound of our defiance, of our faith. This moment that we're in now, we're at a precipice. Ha lachma anya, this is the bread of affliction that we eat on this night, the last night of our old life of slavery, and the first night of our new life of freedom. This year in Egypt, next year, please God, in Eretz Yisrael. Matzah is a snapshot in time, it never gets old. Whereas bread will be mouldy in a couple of days, you can eat matzah a year later and it will taste pretty much the same. And wrapped up in that first taste, the first crunch, will be the memory of every previous Seder night. V'hegadet halevincha. Imma, matzah is the photograph of this moment. That story you told us about your Saba Saba will be retold by every Saba for generations to come. On this night every year, Chag HaMatzos will always be the renewal of this night of redemption, the night that is crystal clear to all of us sitting here around this table who is running the world. It'll be a reminder to every generation that whatever they're going through is part of a plan, whether they're Moranos eating matzah behind locked doors, or they've managed to bake themselves matzahs even though they're in a concentration camp, or they're facing Seder night alone because of a national pandemic. As they take that bite and they sing V'hi Sha'amda, they'll know that they're not the first, they're not alone, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Matzileinu Miyadam, that Hashem always saves us. The matzah is a symbol of our faith and resilience on this night, the night of the birth of our nation, the first ever Seder night. Matzah is a memory which doesn't change or fade with time. It's a tool for future generations to tap into our collective national conscience, to always be able to experience the start of our journey into our destiny as one people with the Torah living in Eretz Yisrael. Aaron, you and your sons are going to be on an even higher spiritual level than the rest of us. We'll all read in Parashat Tzav every year just before Pesach how people will bring a korban mincha to the Kohen, which is also a matzah, so you can eat it throughout the year, and the person bringing it can also have a snapshot of that spiritual height he reached when he came to the Mishkan or the Beis Hamikdash to bring a korban, so that they can tap into that moment of spirituality anytime they need to. Because each new day of your life is the end of your life up until that point and the first day of the rest of your life. So we'll have a mitzvah to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim every day. Each new day is a new chance for renewal and rebirth, but especially every Seder night. As Moshe pauses for breath, Aaron points out the window and says, "Look, the sun's up. It's time to go." Miriam runs to get her big bag of tambourines to hand to all the families as they gather outside the house. And as you leave the house for the last time, you hear one little kid ask, "Emma, did you remember the snacks?" And as his mother hands him a piece of matzah, you hear the wail that echoes throughout the generations, "Oh, why is there never anything to eat on Pesach?" When you do sit down to your own Seder and have that first taste of matzah, try to connect to all those people who came before you, who ate the same matzah that you're eating, and imagine you were there on that first Seder night, that you saw the miracles with your own eyes, and in that moment you understood everything that had ever been and everything that was yet to come. In that moment of clarity, you had complete faith that everything is in Hashem's hands and is for the good. And all those ancestors will be there to greet us when we finally sit down all together. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim habenuyah. Wishing you all a Chag kasher v'sameach.